Back to Boston.com. We are bringing you live results, which we've got. We've got a new mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, who will take the stage at the Park Plaza in just a few minutes. Before that, I'm Joanna Weiss from the Globe, and I am going to talk a little bit to Joan Bernanke, Globe columnist, who is here to make sense of the big results that we got today. Did you predict this one, Joan?
No, I didn't.
Really?
Well, I thought Walsh had a good chance, and I mean, I read the polls like everyone else that saw he was ahead. Couldn't tell what was happening in the final stretch, you never know, but I don't really like predicting elections. I like just covering results.
It was an up and down kind of day, and you know, early on, probably some of those Connolly precincts and wards were bringing in returns.
Right,
first.
It felt like a roller coaster, you know, just calling the different, you know, parties. In the morning, the Walsh people were really predicting very confidently they would win by 6 or 7. When the big returns started coming in downtown, you could feel a sense of anxiety. And then around 3 o'clock, it was like, okay, this is crunch time. We either get our vote out or we don't. And they managed to get it out.
Yeah, in force. So what's the early analysis? I mean, first of all, it was closer than they had early predicted. Just about a 2% race. What does that say about what happened today, and what does that say about what might happen 4 years from now?
Well, I think one of the things it says is that this was John Connolly's race to lose. I mean, he came out as a favorite. People really thought that there was no way that Walsh could defeat him. And for whatever the reasons, I think a little bit of complacency, you know, I always see arrogance out there a bit. The Connolly camp kind of let this get away from them. And I think before they finally realized they were in a real fight, probably about a week ago, or a week to 10 days ago, and they started trying to close in, and it was a little bit too late to close the gap. Yes, they were, Walsh had his union supporters, he had the flyers describing Connolly as a child of privilege. I would argue that was really a savage attack, but I mean, by Boston standards, it's not really all that savage. But while that was happening at one level, Walsh also, I think, did something the Connolly camp didn't expect. Put together those 3 endorsements, Barros Arroyo and Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, put together a coalition of progressive legislators that of course were his friends in the State House, but still represent sort of progressive liberal values, giving that voter the yes, the opening to say, yes, I can vote for Walsh, and I'm not voting for some old school Paul.
Well, that's the thing. People really painted him early on as the traditional kind of lunch bucket Democrat, right? Who was going to be carrying water for the unions and whatever that meant. And he did pull together a bigger coalition. Those progressives did look early on like they would have been in Connolly's camp just because of his education push and because of his profile.
Right, and it's, would have to go back to them and try to figure out why. It did come back down to likability, that phrase. People just seemed to like Marty Walsh. His colleagues seemed to like Marty Walsh. I was picking up that, and I think this often happens when people are reformers and they go against the grain. A lot of colleagues, or some colleagues, just didn't like John Connolly that much, or they didn't like him enough to endorse him or to get behind him in this very critical campaign. I don't think he anticipated. On one hand, you could say the endorsements made it look like Walsh was the candidate of the establishment. We certainly wrote that. He looked like he had the institutional backing of the State House and all his buddies and all that. But Connolly, I think, had the media behind him. How often do you see the Globe and the Herald
both endorsing?
In force endorsing, and really the columnists, sort of the weight of the columnizing and opining, be on his side. And maybe it's just something about the power of the media that it's.
Maybe it does. So let's not
we
even
don't
think about
go
that.
There, though. Right.
But no, it really, the way Marty Walsh will deal with the unions. That was the big concern that seemed to be raised by the establishment media. Is there's a finite amount of money. The mayor is the guy who's the #1 negotiator against the public sector unions, and are we going to give away the farm to the unions instead of to all of these other issues? Was that an oversimplification?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, I guess even though people don't think of me as an optimist, I'm going to express an optimistic point of view here. I think if he wants to prove the doubters wrong, prove the critics wrong, he will come up with a strategy to bend over backwards to not look like he's caving to the unions. You wouldn't want to put Ed Kelly, the firefighters union guy, on your transition team, for one thing. I mean, you'd want to avoid things that would say, aha, he is going to give away the store to them. And if he does, he's vulnerable. The moment he starts doing that, people will start positioning and to run against him, I think. I don't think we're going to see a mayor for 20 years.
Maybe not.
I don't think
Although people wouldn't have said that about Menino 20 years ago either.
I just think times are different, and I don't think people will be as complacent as they were. They won't let a person amass that much power. And if he starts looking like he isn't going to stand up to them, that he is going to give the city away to them, I think fairly quickly you'll see some of these rivals from the last go-round start forming coalitions to run against him.
Now, if John Connolly had won, I think people would have said, wow, there's a mandate for big change, sweeping change, certainly in the school department and in some of the other places. I mean, let's swing the bat or swing the axe. With Marty Walsh in, what's going to happen to the schools? He talked the talk of school reform without the specifics of John Connolly. What do you think we're going to see?
Well, that remains to be seen. It's a good question. I mean, he did say he supported charter schools. He is on the board of a charter school.
Neighborhood House Charter School in Dorchester.
Sweeping change, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Can he deliver on what he said he could do? That he can get the teachers union to the table and get them to accept some of the things that they've been refusing to accept for the last years that have made this such a fight.
Right. He supported He supports a charter school a limited charter school expansion. Right. He supports extended learning time, which is something that the teachers have said no way without further compensation. That actually gets down to a tough issue on the negotiating table.
Right. How he makes that happen, I don't have a clue, but I think it'll be fun to write about.
Definitely. Any other big changes that you can anticipate, or what are the first couple things that he might tackle, given everything that he said during the campaign?
I'd have to think about that. I would just say the other really big story out of tonight is the casino going down in East Boston. I don't know if you
we've talked about that. Let's talk about that again, because that was a resounding, huge defeat.
That was a huge defeat, and it's not only a defeat for Suffolk Downs, but it's a big defeat for Tom Menino. I mean, That was his baby. What has he not been able to do as mayor? He's gotten his way on virtually everything. This was something he really wanted, and it's not to be. So it's not a good night for him on several levels, but I'd say he's probably not feeling too good about that.
What do you think happened in East Boston? Why do you think the casino went down so dramatically? Because it looked like it was going to be closer. Just up in the last week, there was so much intense campaigning.
Well, they've been laying the groundwork for a year plus. They I think, had done a really good job of door to door and selling the idea of jobs and all that. In the end, and this is going to be a great story to tell. Their decisions, this decision by Suffolk Downs to say to Caesars Entertainment, we want you out, rather than let them go before the Gaming Commission and try to make their case that they were suitable and that this standard was too high, to just cut them loose.
Because of this allegation of mob ties.
Of unsuitability and sort of shady mob ties. That made all the difference in the world. It was the October surprise. I mean, and all of a sudden you had a casino without a casino operator. And I think that gave the opponents just a huge opening to say, what are we voting for here?
Well, to say, we don't know what the casino is going to look like. We don't even know what it would be. But also, I think, casting this shadow over the casino industry.
Absolutely, and it had taken so long to come up with that host agreement between the City of Boston and Suffolk Downs with Caesars as the operator. Now, all of a sudden, you're saying, will they live up to that agreement? And who will live up to the agreement? And can we trust them? And clearly, it cast enough doubt on it. So this real David versus Goliath story, the little people, without any money prevailed, and I think it's a great story.
So is Steve Wynn one of the happiest men in America tonight?
Unless he's thinking about what he did in Macau and thinking
that
he can be found unsuitable, in which case we'll end up with a casino in Milford of all places.
Right. And then Palmer also rejected the Mohegan Sun Casino. So there's a lot just across Massachusetts.
So
there's
it shows
a lot of anti-casino sentiment.
That the citizens of Massachusetts, when it's a casino in your backyard, versus the theory of, well, casinos and jobs are two very different creatures, and you don't, bottom line, you don't want it in your backyard.
Which is something John Connolly did say during the mayor's race when pressed and pressed and pressed. He said, well, I guess I wouldn't, I'll let East Boston vote, but I wouldn't want it in my ward.
Yeah, I think he might have lost East Boston.
Yeah, that was one of the wards that we were watching really closely and carefully
Right.
tonight was East Boston. You know, then there was the question of what was going to happen in Roxbury. Clearly, you know, the endorsements helped Marty Walsh. Where else? You know, besides his stronghold of Dorchester, what was the area that really boosted Marty Walsh tonight?
Well, I haven't examined the numbers yet, but I mean, the strategy that was laid out was of course, he needed his base, Dorchester, which he got. He needed the so-called communities of color, which I gather he won enough of to win tonight. He wanted to have a strong showing in Hyde Park and South Boston. And of course, the downtown, the so-called New Boston, was John Connolly territory. Turnout was higher than
it was
projected, higher than the preliminary.
But the preliminary was so low.
Still not enough to get him over the top.
Right,
so,
right. And yeah, he said that was his firewall.
Right, I know. Well, I don't know what it'll take to get those people out, but apparently bike lanes is not enough. So
bike lanes is not enough. Well, we are going to take a quick break. We're still waiting for Marty Walsh to come and give his victory speech at the Park Plaza. So in the meantime, we'll take a quick break, but stay tuned.